It was a little past 2:30 a.m. in an emergency dispatch center in the state of Ohio. The fluorescent lights lit up the quiet room, where only the steady sound of keyboards and police radios filled the air. Most nighttime calls revolved around domestic disputes, car accidents, or false alarms. But when the 911 line rang, Dispatcher Officer Daniels knew from the very first sound that this wouldn't be an ordinary call. "911, what's your emergency?" she asked, her voice steady and professional. On the other end, there was short, shallow breathing. Then a thin, trembling voice, almost breaking into sobs. Please. Someone's in my house. I'm scared." Daniels immediately straightened in her chair. That was the voice of a child. "Sweetheart, you're talking to the police. You're safe on this line, okay? What's your name?" "Sarah. I'm 12 years old," the girl replied, her voice shaking. Daniel's heart sped up. A 12-year-old girl, home alone in the middle of the night, was already reason enough to sound every alarm. "All right, Sarah. I'm here with you. Where are your parents?" They went on a trip. They'll be back tomorrow. I'm alone." Her breathing trembled even harder. "I heard noise in the yard. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a man coming in. He's trying to open the back door." Daniels signaled to the supervisor beside her. He immediately dispatched 2 nearby patrol cars over the radio. "Possible home invasion, child alone, priority 1. The dispatcher went back to the girl, keeping her tone calm. "Sarah, listen carefully. You need to go somewhere safe inside your house." "Are all the doors locked?" "Yes. But he's trying to open the glass door," she answered, almost crying. Daniels took a deep breath. Every second, the situation was getting more dangerous. "Okay. Now listen to me. Go to your bedroom and lock the door. Take the phone with you. Go quickly and quietly." On the line, Daniels heard hurried footsteps, creaking wood, the sound of a door closing and the click of a lock. "I locked it. I'm in my room." "Perfect, you did the right thing. Now I want you to hide somewhere he can't see you. A closet, under the bed. Anywhere. And stay very quiet. I won't hang up, I'll stay here with you until the police arrive." There was a brief silence, then the creak of hinges. The girl's voice came back, muffled, in an almost inaudible whisper. "I'm in the closet." Daniels kept her tone calm, though her own heart was racing. "Very good, Sarah. You're being so brave. The patrol cars are already on the way. It won't be long. Now, I need you to breathe slowly and stay as quiet as you can. Can you do that for me?" "Why, yeah. I can." The girl sobbed. And then a sound cut through the silence. Shattering glass. The microphone clearly picked up the noise of the door being broken. "He's inside." Sarah cried out in panic, before covering her mouth to muffle the sobs. Daniels nearly rose out of her chair, pressing the headset tight against her ear. "Sarah, listen. Stay calm. Don't make a sound. They're almost there, I promise. Hold on. Just breathe." Through the line, the sound of footsteps echoed. Heavy, slow, climbing the stairs. The creak of the wood seemed amplified by the silence. He's coming up," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with fear. Daniels glanced at the supervisor, who confirmed over the radio, "Units less than 2 minutes out." But 2 minutes could feel like forever. The sound grew closer. The heavy breathing of a stranger seemed to invade the call. Sarah tried to hold back her sobs but couldn't. "Sarah, you are not alone. Stay with me. I need you not to make a sound no matter what happens next. The police are almost there." On the other end, the girl swallowed hard. The metallic rattle of a door handle echoed over the line. The intruder was trying to force the bedroom lock. Daniel's heart pounded. She knew that, in just seconds, she might hear something she would never forget. And the worst part, there was nothing she could do, except keep talking. The bedroom was drowned in silence, except for the sound of Sarah's quick, shallow breathing. Inside the dark closet, she clutched the phone with trembling hands, as if that device was her only lifeline. And in truth, it was. At the dispatch center, Officer Daniels leaned forward. pressing her ear tightly against the headset. Every noise that came through the line felt like a terrible warning. The metallic rattle of the doorknob being forced, the wood creaking under pressure, and above all, the heavy breathing of the intruder on the other side of the door. "Sarah, listen to me. You're hiding, right?" Daniels asked, her tone soft but urgent. "Why, yes, in the closet. He's at my door." The girl whispered through sobs, trying to hold herself together. Daniels closed her eyes for a brief second, fighting her own rising anxiety. Across the room, the supervisor signaled. The patrol cars were already on the girls' street, less than a minute away from reaching the house. But a minute could feel like forever. "You're very brave, Sarah. Stay completely still now. No matter what you hear, don't make a sound. Breathe slowly with me." The girl tried to obey, but a sudden cracking sound of wood breaking made her let out a loud sob. The intruder had kicked the bedroom door open. Daniels heard the crash through the line and held her breath. "Sarah, stay calm. He doesn't know where you are. Hold on. The police are already there. They're turning onto your street right this moment." But before she could finish, a sound came through the call that froze her blood. Heavy footsteps inside the bedroom, followed by silence. The man was inside. Sarah held her breath in the closet. The smell of wood and dust pressed in around her, but fear was far stronger. The creaking of boots on the floor grew closer and closer. "He's in here," she whispered, almost inaudible. Daniels pressed the microphone to her lips, silently begging for the patrol cars to arrive faster. She knew time was running out. The intruder stopped in the middle of the room. The sound of a drawer being pulled out, then another. He was searching the space. Sarah trembled, trying to stifle her sobs, but the phone slipped slightly in her hand and tapped softly against the closet wall. That was enough. The sound drew the man's attention. Daniels heard the slow creak of footsteps approaching, each one closer, heavier, until they stopped right in front of the closet. "Don't make a sound, don't move." Daniels whispered urgently, but she knew the girl was already at the mercy of the intruder. On the other end of the line came the sound of the closet door being flung open. A piercing scream shattered the night. "No, let me go." Sarah cried desperately, her voice echoing through the headset. Daniels shot up from her chair as if she could break through the line. "Sarah, hold on. The police are there. Just hold on." But the call was filled with chaos. Objects crashing to the floor, muffled screams, the intruder's heavy breathing, and then silence. Daniel's heart pounded violently. She shouted into the headset, but there was no response. At that very moment, the patrol cars screeched to a halt outside the house. Officers rushed toward the broken door, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the dark. But when they entered, all they found was the aftermath of a struggle. The bedroom ransacked, the closet wide open and empty. Sarah and the man were gone. Daniel still held the phone to her ear, frozen, crushed under the weight of helplessness. She had been with the girl until the very last second, and now only the echo of her screams remained. Sarah's house, a modest two-story home in a residential neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio, was shrouded in darkness when the first patrol cars arrived. Red and blue lights flickered silently. No sirens, so as not to alert the intruder. 2 patrol officers advanced with weapons raised, flashlights mounted on their holsters, while another circled around the back. At dispatch, Daniel still held the headset tight, as if she could bring the girl back simply by calling her name. "Sarah, are you still there? Sarah?" she pleaded, but the line returned nothing but static. The silence cut like a knife. Inside the house, the officers confirmed. The glass door had been forced open, shards scattered across the kitchen floor. Muddy shoe prints marked the man's entry. Upstairs, they found the bedroom destroyed, the closet wide open, clothes strewn about. But there was no sign of the girl. Dispatch, suspect possibly left the residence with the victim, requesting immediate perimeter. The sergeant's deep voice crackled urgently through the radio. Daniel's stomach twisted. She had been with Sarah until the very last second. The sound of the girl's screams still echoed in her mind. As the house was searched, officers found small but chilling clues. A back window left open, dirt smeared across the sill, and a fresh footprint pressed into the lawn. The kidnapper had taken Sarah that way, just minutes before the police arrived. The supervisor called in K-9 units, search dogs trained to track the missing. The once quiet neighborhood began filling with squad cars, flashlight beams slicing through the dark, frightened neighbors peering out from behind curtains. Daniels, still at the center, followed every word through the radio. Her body trembled, but she stayed professional, jotting down times, details, everything. Yet inside, guilt gnawed at her. She had heard the girl being taken, powerless to stop it. "Dispatch, we have tracks leading toward the woods behind Jefferson Street," an officer reported. Dogs barked in the background, straining at their leashes. Flashlights swept along a dirt path that led into a dense patch of woods, a place hunters and campers sometimes used. It was vast, dark, perfect for disappearing. Daniels pressed her lips together. The clock was ticking. Every passing minute cut the odds of finding Sarah alive. At that moment, she made a personal decision. She wouldn't just sit at dispatch. She requested to be moved to the scene, arguing that she had direct information about the victim. The supervisor hesitated, but he knew the call had marked her in a way that couldn't be ignored. Not long after, Daniels arrived at the scene. Lantern beams pierced the forest, the damp midnight air heavy on everyone's shoulders. She took a deep breath, recalling Sarah's trembling voice, and silently promised she would do everything in her power to bring her back. One of the dogs barked sharply, pulling the group's attention. On the ground, half buried in the leaves, lay a broken beaded bracelet, colorful and small. Daniels recognized it instantly. Sarah had mentioned wearing it during the call, a gift from her mother before the trip. Her heart nearly stopped. "She was here," Daniels whispered, holding the object with gloved hands. The team of officers pressed on, guided by the tracks and the dogs. Every step carried tension. Branches snapping underfoot, shadows shifting between the trees, the gnawing sense that the abductor might be watching them from somewhere close. Daniels looked up at the starless sky, the weight of the silence pressing down. She knew this search would be long, maybe painful. But she also knew one thing. The voice of that girl would never leave her mind. This wouldn't be just another 911 call. This was the call. And, in ways none of them yet understood, the lives of everyone involved that night would never be the same. The woods behind Jefferson Street were quiet, except for the sound of officers' boots sinking into the mud and the constant barking of the search dogs. Every snapping branch seemed to announce the kidnapper's presence. Daniel stayed close to the front line, gripping her flashlight tightly, trying to focus, though the memory of Sarah's voice haunted her with every step. Suddenly, a sound cut through the night, a scream. Sharp, desperate, childlike. Daniels froze, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. That's Sarah," she whispered, hardly able to believe it. The officers immediately aimed their flashlights toward the sound. The scream echoed again, followed by sobs and a muffled attempt to cry, "Help." Daniels swallowed hard. She had heard the last moments of the call, but never imagined she would find her so close to that terror. "Move! Quick, over there!" shouted a sergeant, pointing to a clearing among the dense trees. The team advanced cautiously. The kidnapper was there, trying to drag Sarah, who struggled with every ounce of strength a frightened child could muster. Daniel's flashlight illuminated the scene. The man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket, gripping the girl's arm. Sarah screamed, but her voice sounded small against the cold night and the silent forest. "Let her go. Now!" A police officer shouted, weapon drawn. The kidnapper glanced at the officers, startled, and released the girl for a brief moment, trying to retreat into the trees. But the dog surged forward, barking fiercely, and the officers closed in. Sarah fell to her knees, sobbing but alive. Daniels ran to her, kneeling beside the girl. "It's okay now, you're safe. They won't hurt you anymore, okay?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. Shivering, Sarah clung to the dispatcher as if she were the only solid thing in the world. Between tears, she whispered, I thought he was going to take me." "I know, sweetheart. I know," Daniels murmured, stroking the girl's back, trying to convey every ounce of security she could. The kidnapper, realizing he had no way out, surrendered. One officer quickly handcuffed him while another checked that he had no weapons or other hazards in his hands. The tension began to ease, though the impact of what had just occurred still lingered in the air. Daniels finally took a deep breath. The knot in her stomach didn't disappear, but the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, quiet relief. She looked at Sarah, still trembling, knowing that this moment would be etched into both of their memories forever. "Let's get you to the paramedics, okay?" Daniels said, helping the girl to her feet. "You were so brave, you know that?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. The darkness of the forest now seemed less threatening. The worst had passed, but every officer knew that night would leave invisible scars. As the ambulance approached, Daniels glanced around and realized that every tree, every shadow, had witnessed the fight for a little girl's life. And in that instant, something shifted inside her. The sense of helplessness she had felt when answering the call had turned into determination. She would never forget Sarah's voice, nor the courage of the child who, even surrounded by terror, never lost hope. The kidnapper was taken into custody, the girl handed to paramedics, and the police began the procedures for documentation and investigation. But above all, that night ended with something rare, a life saved against impossible odds. The woods were still shrouded in darkness as the officers began tracking every trace left by the kidnapper and Sarah. The beams from their flashlights cut through the light fog, creating shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Each step on the wet leaves made hearts race faster. Daniels, following closely, couldn't help but relive the girl's screams in her mind. She clutched the radiophone to her chest, silently repeating every word from the call. "Stay quiet. Breathe. I'm here with you." Each phrase had become a weapon against the despair threatening to overwhelm her. "She may have hidden, or he may have moved further into the woods," the sergeant told the team, his voice firm but tense. "K-9 units. Full focus. Let's follow the trail of the bracelet and the shoe we found." The dogs barked, straining at their leashes, sniffing the leaf-strewn ground. The muddy footprints showed that the man had carried the girl, but Sarah was still alive. Each step through the forest felt like an endless labyrinth, and the fear that the kidnapper might notice the approaching officers only heightened the tension. Daniels took a deep breath, observing every tree, every shadow, every movement. She noticed subtle signs: crushed leaves, broken branches, a piece of fabric snagged on a tree. Everything indicated they were on the right path. But time was merciless. "Faster. Every minute counts," shouted an officer, realizing the man was trying to throw the dogs off. With every twist and turn in the woods, Daniel's heart pounded harder. She remembered Sarah's frantic breathing, the sobs, the sound of the closet door opening. Each step felt like moving closer to a ghost of what she almost lost. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was only minutes, one of the dogs stopped and barked frantically. A metallic glint reflected in a flashlight beam, a small broken beaded bracelet hanging from a branch. Daniels knelt, trembling, touching the object. "She was here and she's alive," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Following the trail, the team reached a denser clearing, where the ground appeared more disturbed, as if someone had struggled or been carried. The absolute silence of the forest was now broken only by boots, the wind, and the barking dogs. The kidnapper, realizing he was surrounded, began to run, dragging the girl forcibly. The officer's adrenaline surged. Every second counted, every decision was critical. Daniels ran alongside, keeping contact with the officers and trying to follow Sarah's breathing through the memory of the call. "We're almost there. She won't get hurt, I promise," she repeated mentally, every word an anchor against fear. And then, amidst shadows and broken branches, a muffled scream echoed. "Sarah!" The team ran toward the sound, hearts in their throats, finally finding the girl surrounded by officers. The kidnapper was subdued, handcuffed, and restrained. Exhausted and in shock, Sarah clung to one of the officers, crying but alive. Daniels knelt beside her, holding Sarah's trembling hands. "It's okay now, you're safe. I'm with you." The adrenaline gave way to deep relief, mixed with the realization that Sarah's life could have ended that night. But thanks to the courage of the girl and the determination of the officers, the worst had been avoided. The woods, once a stage for terror, were now silent witnesses to the triumph of hope and resilience. Every leaf, every tree seemed to whisper, "She survived." Dawn began to tint the sky with gray hues, but the sense of relief was still mixed with fear and uncertainty. Sarah was safe, yet the expression on her face showed that the night wasn't truly over for her. She shivered, clutching a blanket provided by the paramedics, her wide eyes still reflecting the terror of the early morning. Daniels, kneeling beside the girl, gently stroked her hair, trying to convey a sense of safety. "You're very brave, Sarah. What you did tonight was incredible." I thought he was going to hurt me." The girl's voice barely emerged, choked by tears. I just wanted someone to get here in time." Daniels felt her throat tighten. Each word reminded her of the child's fragility and the strength she had shown simply by surviving. Meanwhile, the officers were examining the perimeter of the woods and the clearing where the kidnapper had been apprehended. Every broken branch, every muddy footprint told a story of terror and resistance. One officer found a piece of torn jacket snagged on a tree. Another discovered muddy shoe prints that didn't match the tracks left by the kidnapper. "That means he might have had help or he didn't act alone," the sergeant commented, frowning. Daniels stood, carefully observing the details. Every small clue was crucial. Sarah's broken bracelet, the shoes left behind, the tear in the jacket, all indicated the girl had fought, but also revealed the violence of the situation. "Sarah, can you tell me everything you remember about him? Any detail could help us understand what happened," Daniel said softly. The girl took a deep, trembling breath and began to describe. The man's height, the dark jacket, his hoarse voice when she screamed, the way he held her arm tightly. Each detail was a vital piece, each memory laden with fear. Daniels listened intently, tears in her eyes, impressed by the child's memory despite the trauma. Meanwhile, the K-9 team continued to track the woods, expanding the perimeter, searching for any clues indicating the kidnapper's escape route or hiding place. One officer found a broken cell phone beneath leaves and branches, possibly belonging to the suspect, and carefully lifted it, knowing it could contain crucial evidence. The sergeant called the team together, glancing at the gray sky. "We will find out who did this. She deserves justice." Daniels felt the weight of that promise. It wasn't just about rescuing the girl. It was about protecting her life and her dignity, showing that evil would not go unpunished. Sarah, still wrapped in the blanket, looked up at Daniels with eyes full of both trust and fear. "You're going to be okay. And we're going to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else," Daniel said firmly, yet with emotion. With each step of the investigation, the tension and despair of the previous night gave way to a mix of relief, fear, and determination. Every officer felt the responsibility to restore not just the girl's safety, but her confidence in the world around her. Even as the day brightened, the silent woods seemed to hold the memory of that terrible night, reminding everyone that the courage of a child, combined with the dedication of those willing to fight for her, could face the deepest darkness and bring hope even in the bleakest moments. Sarah knew that night would change her life forever. Daniels knew she would never be the same either. But together they had survived. And the determination to follow every clue left by the kidnapper only grew stronger with every passing minute. The woods were shrouded in heavy silence, broken only by the sound of dry leaves crunching under the officers' boots and the anxious barking of the search dogs. Every step was an alert, every snapped branch a potential threat. Everyone knew the final moment was near. Daniels, at the front line, took a deep breath. The image of Sarah's trembling voice on the phone still echoed in her mind. She remembered every instruction she had given, every word meant to calm, and now she saw the reality of those fears materialize before her eyes. The sergeant pointed to a cabin almost hidden among the dense trees. It was the kidnapper's hideout. "He's in there. Prepare to approach." The patrol cars were positioned discreetly at the edges of the woods. One officer opened the front door while others flanked the cabin from the sides and rear. The dogs barked, picking up the scent of the victim and the suspect. Sarah was inside, bound, her face etched with terror. "Police! Let the girl go now," shouted the sergeant, his voice firm but controlled. The kidnapper, realizing he was surrounded, tried to retreat, but there was no escape. He gripped Sarah tightly, desperate. The tension was palpable. Every second could be fatal. Daniels held her breath, almost unable to look, yet unable to turn away. "Sarah, I'm here." "Hold on," she murmured, trying to convey confidence even as adrenaline threatened to overwhelm her. The man resisted, attempting to flee into the woods, dragging the girl. One officer moved first, grabbing him by the shoulders. Another team blocked the exit. There was a moment of intense struggle. The man thrashed, Sarah screamed, and each officer moved with trained precision, balancing force and caution. Daniels felt the weight of the tension increase with every second. She remembered the muffled screams she had heard on the initial call, and now she heard them again, but this time accompanied by footsteps and commands that meant hope. The police intervention was working. Finally, after moments that felt eternal, the kidnapper was subdued. Handcuffs secured his hands, and he was placed on the ground. Exhausted and in shock, Sarah collapsed into Daniel's arms, who immediately enveloped her as if she could protect the entire world in that embrace. "It's okay now. You're safe. I promise, no one will ever hurt you again," Daniels whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Sarah sobbed, trying to catch her breath, while the officers checked every corner of the cabin, ensuring there were no weapons or traps. The kidnapper, now restrained, was escorted out, surrounded by officers and flashlight beams illuminating his defeat. The woods, witness to so much terror and courage, remained silent, as if acknowledging the conclusion of this nightmare. Daniel stayed kneeling beside Sarah, feeling the intensity of every second. The fear, the hope, the fight for survival. "You were incredibly brave, Sarah. So very brave." The girl looked at her with tear-filled eyes, yet filled with trust. For the first time since the 911 call, she felt she could breathe safely, that someone had truly protected her until the very end. The confrontation was over. The terror of the night had ended. But the emotion of survival and courage would remain with everyone there, forever etched in the memory of each officer, of Daniels, and most of all of Sarah. The sun had already risen over the woods when the officers finally located the isolated cabin the kidnapper had used as a hideout. The old, poorly maintained structure was almost hidden among dense trees and bushes, but the tracks and the dog's keen sense of smell pointed clearly to it. The team's hearts were racing. They knew every second could be crucial for Sarah's life. Daniels, alongside the officers, kept the radio close, even though there was no active call. This was no longer just a 911 call. It was real life unfolding before her eyes, and the weight of responsibility seemed to press down like a ton. "Everyone ready? Remember, he has a child. Move fast, but don't put Sarah at risk," the sergeant ordered, his voice firm but tense. Flashlights cut through the darkness inside the cabin. The kidnapper held Sarah, trying to block them. But before he could react, the officers advanced in a coordinated movement. Sarah's scream echoed, now mixed with the team's command. "Let her go. Police." The man tried to resist, but the officers were prepared. In a fast yet tense confrontation, the kidnapper was subdued. Handcuff by handcuff, he was restrained. Sarah collapsed into Daniel's arms, trembling, sobbing, but alive. The girl clung tightly to the dispatcher, as if she were the only anchor in a world that had almost crumbled around her. "It's okay now. You're safe, Sarah. I promise nothing will ever happen to you again," Daniels whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The girl cried, feeling a mix of fear, relief, and exhaustion. The experience had been terrifying, yet it revealed an impressive strength, despite the terror Sarah had endured. As paramedics examined her, Daniels stayed at her side, watching every movement, every breath. The bond formed during the 911 call and throughout the search was now unbreakable. She had been a voice of safety amidst the chaos and darkness, and now she could witness Sarah's life being saved because of that trust. The officers led the handcuffed kidnapper away, each step echoing through the silent woods. Sarah, now protected, looked around, recognizing the faces that would become symbols of safety and hope in her life. "I never want to go through something like that again," Sarah said, her voice still trembling but firmer now. "I know, sweetheart. But you are incredibly brave. And we'll be here any time you need us," Daniels replied, squeezing her hand firmly. The surrounding community began to gather quietly, alerted by the police activity. Even without words, Everyone understood the magnitude of this girl's courage and the effort of each officer who had fought to bring her back. And in that moment, something changed forever. Sarah felt she could trust again that she was not alone, and that even in the face of the worst terror, hope existed. Daniels knew she would never forget the midnight call, nor the girl who had taught her so much about courage, resilience, and faith. As morning progressed, the silent woods bore witness to life's triumph over fear. Amid tears, embraces, and promises of protection, one truth became clear to everyone. When a child's courage meets the determination of those who fight for her, even the deepest darkness can be overcome. Sarah returned home safely, but the story of that night would stay with her forever. Not as a memory of terror, but as proof of strength, hope, and the power of never giving up.